Today we're looking at GW's Imperial Guard faction focus for 10th edition. Let's take a look. As per usual, the first up is their army rule, Voice of Command. It's the logical choice for the Guard, as even back in older editions, it's functioned like a game mechanic, and not just a simple rule that says your army likes to reroll this. Regardless, there are quite a lot of changes to this very thematic Imperial Guard mechanic. For starters, compared to 9th edition, the list of orders itself has been drastically reduced. I'm not too surprised by this, but I imagine Guard players will feel the loss of some thematic fun. Each officer's datasheet will specify which orders it can issue, much like how Psychers seem to have fixed powers. And each officer's datasheet will specify who they can give orders to, which I presume would facilitate tank commanders using these orders on tank units. As written, these orders are issued to units within 6 inches, so it remains to be seen if tank commanders will have a rule that will add another 6 inches, carrying over the longer range they have had for issuing orders in 9th. As for the orders themselves, most of the key staples are here from the infantry list. You've got move for, you guessed it, more movement, in order to boost weapon skill and ballistic skill, the latter of which is certainly more thematically appropriate than taking aim modifying armor penetration. First rank, second rank now boosts the attacks of rapid-fire weapons, which makes sense for your last gun-wielding infantry squads. Take Cover offers a defensive order which gives +1 to save to a max of 3+, and Duty and Honor boosts leadership and OBSEC. Of this list, I'd imagine the first 5 will be available to standard infantry officers, the first 3 will be available to tank officers, and Duty and Honor will likely be the Commissar order, though this is just my guess. Annoyingly, like with the Chaos Space Marine faction focus, GW has decided to not share the Detachment Rule for the Imperial Guard. Or did they? They did. They just didn't make it obvious. It seems the combined Regiment detachment, which we know is their detachment from the previewed stratagem further down in the article, will grant the Imperial Guard the Born Soldiers rule, which maintains its current function, conferring lethal hits on ranged attacks, but now only to units which remain stationary. Furthermore, it'll offer an enhancement to give a character the Drill Commander ability to let stationary units score critical hits on 5s and 6s, as well as the relic Death Mask of Olanius, which clamps the minimum OC value to the bearer's unit to 1 when battle shocked. The latter, while good, is not intriguing to me. Obviously, details around the detachment rules are far more substantive. I think this is another excellent example of Warhammer Community doing a terrible job of conveying the information which is more important. Next up is the iconic Battle Line Unit preview, Cadian Shock Troops. Their profiles are pretty much what we would expect relative to the Marines. Worse toughness and leadership by 1, and a 5-up armor save. Ability-wise, there are some intriguing notes here. Their Shock Troops ability is now one oriented towards flexibility rather than efficiency, now providing them sticky objective control if they control an objective at the end of their command phase. But perhaps more interestingly, is that the unit has a War Gear ability called Voxcaster, which gives you 1 command point if you roll a 5+ when you target the unit with a stratagem. Which is a way to represent the utility of the Voxcaster, I suppose. Look, it's certainly simpler, but I much prefer the idea of Voxcasters boosting the range of orders, which is what they do in World, rather than potentially refunding a command point. Hell, I'd prefer if they interacted with orders at all rather than interacting with stratagems. But it is an ability, one I am sure every infantry squad of any type will be able to leverage. Next, we got a full preview of the Baneblade. The Imperial Guard's signature Lord of War sits nicely between the Land Raider and Necron's Monolith in terms of toughness, but it has a few more wounds. I'll be honest, I'm not the most well-versed when it comes to the Guard's weapon profiles, but I'm not seeing anything too crazy or out of line when it comes to its weapons. Though Heavy Stubbers stand out to me as they are now a 3-attack rapid-fire 3 weapon, so 1 less shot than before, but when within half range you'll be making 6 attacks, which feels much more suitable for a pintle-mounted heavy machine gun. This change, assuming it's consistent, will surely impact the Iron Hail Stubbers used by the AdMech and Primaris vehicles. And I would be remiss not to mention that the Baneblade does have an interesting Rolling Fortress rule, which essentially provides cover to units it obscures, which I think is a nice rule, as I'm a big fan of when units are able to interact with other units. Moving on, we get 2 big cannon weapon profiles for preview for the Imperial Guard. The first is a Leman Russ Battle Cannon, which has reduced range and 1 less AP but improved strength from its current iteration. which matches up with the dialing back of AP on the modest weapons, but increasing the strength on those vehicle-based weapons so they are ideal tools to go into now tougher vehicles. Which falls in line with regards to correcting one of my big criticisms with how vehicles are ruled in 9th edition, so I'm happy to see this trend persist as the faction previews continue. Most notably though, is the ballistic skill value of 4+. Given how hit rates are now on the weapon's profile, I would take this to mean there is no more +1 to hit for turret weapons. And the second big cannon weapon spotlight is the Volcano Cannon. And at first glance, it's like...
Mother of God.
However, it's largely been toned down from where it sits currently. The same AP and damage, more strength to bring it in line with the improved toughness of vehicles, but the big losses for the Volcano Cannon are its attacks reduction from D3+3, and no longer having the inbuilt +1 to hit from the turret weapon ability, which we could say is justified if lethality is supposed to be toned down in 10th edition. And lastly, we have the combined regiment detachment stratagem, reinforcements. 2 command points to add a destroyed regiment unit to your strategic reserves. I'll admit 2 command points is steep. Keep in mind the regiment keyword isn't a subfaction label which applies to all units in, let's say, your Catachan army. Looking at the shock troops datasheet, it seems to be likely tied to infantry style units, which, like I said, seems pretty steep for a basic guardsman unit. But getting a group of veteran Scions or Karskin back could be worthwhile. But you know what, even if it's limited to basic battle line units, I think there will be circumstances where this utility will be valued, assuming you don't have to pay for reinforcement points. Well, that's it for this Imperial Guard faction focus. Overall, it's not the most exciting. The Guard Codex is, after all, fairly new, and is more likely to be similar than different in 10th edition. Overall, I'd give this faction focus a 4 out of 10. For me, it doesn't spark much joy, and doesn't well paint a picture of the Imperial Guard's toolkit. It's the failing to clearly illustrate these core aspects of the Guard's toolkit which comes across as incompetent. Why are these far more important detachment rules relegated to text, but we have 2 turret weapons and a Baneblade datasheet in the spotlight? Call me crazy, but I think it would be pretty apt for faction-focused articles to paint a clear picture of a faction's toolkit, and illustrate as clearly as they are able to how an army is characterized in play. But tell me, I want to hear from you guys, and especially those Imperial Guard players. What do you think of what has been shown in this faction focus?